Good morning, everyone. We are going to give it a couple minutes before we start. Everyone, we're going to give it about one more minute. There's still people logging in, and then we will go ahead and start the presentation. Thanks for your patience. All righty. All right, everybody, welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for everyone for attending today's webinar, sponsored by 160 Marina Bay in Fort Lauderdale. My name is Jordan Lederman. I am the Director of Sales for the project 160 Marina Bay in Fort Lauderdale. We're excited to present today's webinar, where we will be talking about residency issues on the move, people moving to Florida and establishing residency, which will affect your taxes. And in today's market, we have a ton of people moving, especially from places like the Northeast. To help us talk about today's discussion, we have the industry experts. We have Faith Gorman. She is the Director of State and Local Taxes for Dazcal Bolton. She's been practicing corporate and personal taxes for over 30 years. And we have Teague Lawrence. He's a practicing tax attorney for over 25 years, also a partner in 160 Marina Bay. So thank you, Faith, and thank you, Teague, for being here today.
Thank you, Jordan.
Before we get started, I do want to talk a little bit about 160 Marina Bay and basically how we came to this webinar. We did come to this webinar because we have a ton of buyers and interested people talking about moving to Southeast Florida. A lot of our buyers for the project are from out of state as well. Every state really, but mainly from the Northeast, places like New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey. So we really wanted to give some insight on people moving down here. 160 Marina Bay is a beautiful new project that we're launching in the heart of Fort Lauderdale. We're really excited. We just opened our sales gallery about a mile from the site, half mile from the site, directly on Las Olas Boulevard, which is the main street. This is a beautiful 16-unit boutique luxury condominium building. It was really designed to give residents spacious units, ultra luxurious, super high tech. And being in Fort Lauderdale, we have a 14 boat slip marina in the back. The building's only 5 stories. The residences start at level 2 to level 5. So that's only 4 units per floor, 8 units per elevator, because we have 2 semi-private elevator shafts. For those of you who don't know, Fort Lauderdale is known as the Venice of Americas. There are canals and waterways that go all throughout the city. There's restaurants, there's bars, there's art galleries. Everything lines the waterways in Fort Lauderdale, which is why it's known as the Venice of Americas. It's also the yachting capital of the world. There are more registered yachts in Fort Lauderdale than anywhere else in the world. So it's a boater's paradise. And that's part of the reason that we included a 14 boat slip marina in the back of our project. Fort Lauderdale also has some of the nicest beaches in Southeast Florida, white sand, turquoise water, and our project is located 1.4 miles to the heart of Fort Lauderdale Beach. The location of our project, you can't beat it. It is absolutely the best. We are located on an aisle called Isle of Venice Drive. It's right off of the main drag, which is Las Olas Boulevard. Las Olas, in one direction, you have the central downtown area. Here you have high rises, you have restaurants, you have art galleries, you have shopping, you have bars. It's 0.9 miles to everything located in downtown. And then in the other direction on Las Olas Boulevard, you have the main part of the beach, about 1.4 miles. So it's a long walk in both directions, a bicycle ride. Some of our buyers have already purchased golf carts because they plan to take their golf carts back and forth. So our location is amazing. We're also located on the far end of the aisle, so it's more private, has less traffic. And most importantly is that we are facing east. So what that means is you get to enjoy your large terraces at all hours of the day. Here in Florida, the west sun is really hot. So if you have a west-facing terrace, it's not as enjoyable with the heat. Also, we're overlooking all of these aisles, which are only single-family home mansions. So you're overlooking the lush landscaping of these beautiful homes. One house across the street just sold for about $20 million. Fort Lauderdale in general, if we look at the area map up here on the top left, it is the main city directly in the center of the Tri-County area. We have Miami about 26 minutes to the south, and we have Palm Beach about 26 minutes to the north. So we are the center city in the Tri-County area. And some of our buyers, they move because their companies either moved to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, or Palm Beach, but they chose to live directly in the middle, which is Fort Lauderdale. There's also a thing called the Bright Line, which is a few years old in Southeast Florida. It connects Miami to Fort Lauderdale in 26 minutes, and then Fort Lauderdale to Palm Beach in another 26 minutes. The last stop that they're constructing now will be Fort Lauderdale to Orlando in 2.5 hours. This is a high-speed luxury train with internet, they serve food. So it's something that's really amazing for the city. Fort Lauderdale in general is extremely growing, even though it's already an established, sophisticated city with a booming downtown. There's projects like Elon Musk Tunnel, which is going to connect the downtown to the beach. There's $1 billion convention center being built by the port. But this is a beautiful overall aerial view of our project. We're located right here. And you can see the waterways of Fort Lauderdale and how you can take your boat to many places. You have one of the busiest cruise ports in the world, in addition to one of the busiest airports. You're about 4 miles from the Fort Lauderdale International Airport. So again, the location's amazing and our project is beautiful. It's very modern in design, but still has that sophisticated look that Fort Lauderdale is known for. And the basic rundown is 16 units. We have 2 different models. Both are 3-bedroom, 3.5 baths with almost 3,000 square feet just in the inside. We will have a beautiful pool along the marina, lounge chairs, a beautiful gazebo with the barbecue area, and then cabanas all throughout the property. You can see how nice our marina is in the back as well. And some features about the unit, we're gonna have huge 10-foot ceilings. This is all high end. The technology going into these units is gonna be amazing. A true smart home. You can control everything from your lighting, your temperature, your window shades, opening your front door, all with voice control, an app on your phone, or through one of the touch panels going in throughout the unit. This is a rendering of our corner unit living room. You can see how spacious it's going to be. We're doing Italian porcelain floors all throughout the unit, including the terrace as well. In our corner units, you will get a wraparound balcony overlooking the lush landscaping of the mansions across the way. Our terraces were designed to be 10 to 11 feet in depth. What that means is you can do a beautiful couch sitting area outside or a massive dining table. We have glass railings all throughout, so you can get that nice water view, including the lush landscape view. Even our terrace doors, they're 2-panel double doors that open wide, so you get a nice wide opening, which blends the indoor and outdoor space. Every little detail about this project was thoroughly thought of by the development team. Our kitchens are chef-inspired U-shaped kitchens. We have a huge 10-foot island going in, 2-toned Italian cabinets imported direct from Italy, and all the high-end appliances. We have Wolf, Miele, and Sub-Zero for the fridge, hidden panel for the fridge and dishwasher. We're using beautiful matte black plumbing fixtures all throughout the unit. Outside in both models of the kitchen, we're doing a beautiful dining area. And in the dining area, we're giving you a nice full wet bar, the same matte black finishes with the sink and also another sub-zero wine fridge. This is a center unit, second floor unit. You can see just how wide they are, really designed to feel like a house and give you that extra space. We already have a couple buyers for the second floor. Some people do want to be as close to the water as possible. In the bathrooms, we're doing the bedrooms, hand-scraped oak wood, and our master bedrooms in both models will have terrace access as well. And then our bathrooms are really designed to feel like a spa. We have floating tubs with tub mount fillers. This is a center residence master bathroom with a double vanity. And in the corner unit master bathroom, we're doing the tub in front of the window. Just to give you an example of one of our floor plans, this is the popular corner unit. Just to show you how these really were meant to feel like a house. You do have a semi-private elevator, which opens into your vestibule. From your vestibule, it doesn't open into your living area. You open into a foyer where you can greet your guests. From there, you have a huge open floor plan, which is very popular, wraparound terrace. And my favorite feature is in both models, you essentially have two different wings of the unit. Down one wing is the entire master suite, and down the other wing are the two other guest bedrooms, very great size, both with their own closets and bathrooms, full-size laundry room. You can't ask for much more in these units. The floor plans are phenomenal. A nighttime rendering of what the building is going to look like. Our price ranges for the project, they start at about 2.2 for the second floor units, up to about 2.55 for the penthouse units. This is still one of our very low level pricing. The more we sell, the more we increase. So it's a great time, if you're interested in the project, to talk to me about some of our remaining inventory. Our estimated completion date for the project is about 1 year from today. We're saying beginning of third quarter of next year. Construction is completely underway. We're going vertical. Everything's already in place. So we do plan to deliver about July or August of next year. If you're in town, we have a sales gallery a half a mile from the site, which is where I'm recording from right now, directly on Las Olas. If you're not in town, contact me. We can do a Zoom presentation. I'd love to tell you more about the project. And that is beautiful 160 Marina Bay. So with that being said, I do want to turn it over to Faith to talk about residency issues for all of our RSAters thinking about moving down here and what they can do in preparation for that move. So Faith, I'll let you take it away. And again, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And Jordan, that was a wonderful presentation. And 1 year from now, that gives us lots of timing to plan for a change in residency. So that was a nice point and a nice jumping off point. I am going to share my screen so you can look more at the presentation than at me. Few points of housekeeping before I share screen. We will pause between different sections of the presentation. We welcome questions that Jordan will read to me in between. We will have some time at the end, hopefully, for questions as well. And just so everyone knows, we will be sharing the presentation as well as a checklist after today. So let me share my screen.
Faith, thanks for reminding me about that. I always forget. But yes, there is a chat box and also a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you do have a question for Faith or Teague or myself about the project, definitely type it in and I will try to address those questions to Faith or Teague.
Okay, so good morning again, everybody. Interesting doing a webinar when I can't see my audience. So I really do welcome questions or any sort of dialogue. We welcome that rather than me talking the entire time. We can give a little break for Jordan once in a while and Teague can jump in as needed. So wanted to talk about some state residency issues today and moving from a high tax state such as in the Northeast, New York, Massachusetts. I'm personally from Rhode Island, but I did live in New York for a number of years. What are we going to talk about today? So first of all, most important, and that's why going to Jordan's point with the residences being done in a year, this requires a lot of advanced planning for individuals who want to change their residency. So it requires a lot of planning because unless you're planning on picking up, selling immediately where you are and just, basically coming to Florida and leaving everything behind, there are some very necessary planning that's involved in the process. So the questions we'll consider today are what are the key planning considerations for someone looking to move from a state like New York or Massachusetts to Florida. We also want to talk about changing your state of residence. It's much more than checking off a box, getting a driver's license or voter registration. These are important steps, but there are some very key requirements that you have to undertake to successfully establish residency in Florida. A couple other things we're going to discuss today is when you're audited. And a lot of times people are audited when they do make a move from New York or Massachusetts or California to Florida. And we're going to talk about some of the factors to determine winning or losing an audit. I'm a pet person, so I will share a special pet story when we get there. And then most importantly, let's talk what's practical. What's really practical when you're looking to move? So how did we get here? Let's start with that. So recently, the number of people coming into Florida has reached an all-time high. It's due in large part to two factors. No big surprise, the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which limits deductions for state and local taxes up to $10,000 a year on an individual's federal income tax return. And for wealthy taxpayers, this is translated into much larger federal income tax bills. And let's not forget to talk about how the pandemic has really, really changed the dynamic and landscape of working these days. People have realized I can work from anywhere. The concept of working remotely is very appealing rather than being, if folks don't want to be in a metropolitan area or a city or an urban area, they're more comfortable being outside the city or a move to Florida, which we are known as the Sunshine State. And we're very proud of that fact. I personally have been here for 25 years, started my career 30 years ago. And I was just saying this to Teague and Jordan before we started, that one of my first cases when I was working in New York City was a gentleman who was changing his lifestyle and wanted to become a cowboy out in Wyoming. And this was how I was introduced to the concept of residency. So super cool. Things you remember over the years. I will tell you, I've been in Florida for 25 years in the state and local tax arena, and never have I had so many folks contacting me regarding their move to Florida, change of residency, from a couple that wants to retire to CEOs that want to completely relocate their business to Florida. So it's a super exciting time for us in state and local. Okay, so let's start. Let's talk about some of the key planning considerations for someone looking to move from New York to Florida. It's very important to keep in mind, every state has their own kind of take on what's a change in residency, how you determine when you've changed your residency. So convincing Florida that you're a resident, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
Does not mean your old state will let you go so easily and determine that you're no longer a resident. A couple things, go ahead, Teague.
No, I was just saying that, what people really need to understand is with all the dynamics of the states in the Northeast and those high tax jurisdictions like California, people are looking to, lighten their load. So they're looking for the low tax jurisdictions, but those taxing authorities in those high tax jurisdictions are still wanting the revenue. So they're looking at those people who have the quote unquote move to Florida. So, when you're looking at your situation and you're planning and you're doing those things, what you really should be conscious of is that you're just trying to protect yourself from that back end audit. And that's why you need to do the things that Faith is going to discuss today.
A couple key considerations as we have the conversation today. So one of the big topics that came up, particularly during the pandemic, we had, I would just say, an onslaught of people wanting to work remotely in Florida. Makes sense. It's beautiful here, most of the year. We have a small little season where it's a little warm, but for the most part, it's beautiful. So folks are working remotely. Well, one of the issues that we face is if your business that you work for or that you own is located and headquartered in New York, it's very important if you're going to work remotely to consider, particularly if you move to Florida, that your wages may not escape taxation in New York. And that's called the convenience of the employer test. And basically, short version is, if you're thinking of moving here, one of the things to think about, will I still work for my employer, say in New York, or Massachusetts has a similar rule, I believe. And that's an important consideration. You automatically do not get to source your wages to Florida if you're still working remotely for a company headquartered in New York. Another big important factor, will the move be gradual to Florida? In other words, will you keep a place in New York? Will you keep a place in the Northeast? Or are you just going to cut and run and move to Florida overnight? Very important factors to keep in mind. If you're keeping a home in your current resident state, that's almost guaranteeing an audit. And this is where Teague's point comes into play, where it's critical to do everything correctly. There's a favorite concept that I was introduced to when I first started in New York on residency cases. And that concept lasts today. It's called a creeping domicile. And when I mention that to anyone I've spoken to, it likely gets a scratching of the head. And it basically means most of the time, you can't just pick a date in the sand and say, I moved today, August, whatever today is, August 17th or August 16th. I moved today. I'm moving to Florida. I'm keeping my place in New York, a vacation home, maybe in the Hamptons, but I'm moving today. The state, and New York is famous for this, California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, they look at it as a step-by-step process. So one of the things you have to keep in mind is there might be a beginning point in time, and then you might creep into Florida over a period of a year. So in the case that these residences will be finished roughly a year from now, you may start the process now, go to contract, find a place in Florida, but it's an evolution over time. Get your driver's license. Maybe that happens, you know, you rent a place in anticipation of your home being done. You want to be here a few months before. Those are really important factors. Again, keeping the home in the former resident state on a move to Florida, really an important consideration before you decide whether you want to make a change and move to Florida.
I think, Faith, just to add something, I find that when I deal with mostly federal issues, but the same kind of holds true for any sort of taxpayer. A lot of times taxpayers, they inevitably let their own perceptions of their own situation become their reality. In other words, they're saying, well, I moved to Florida and I got a Florida driver's license, so I'm fine. And they just move on and they assume that they've done what they needed to do. But what you really need to do is sit down with a professional, someone, if not Faith, someone that you trust and that you have the ability to feel confident in the advice. And you need to sit down with them and let them know what you're doing. And I always tell my clients this as well on the federal side. One of the first questions when somebody comes in and they have an issue, I say, what did you tell your CPA? All right. Because as soon as you advise your CPA of your intentions about what you're doing, you've sort of created a layer of insulation for yourself. So if you end up doing something wrong down the road, at least your CPA was on notice of it. And then that becomes sort of the, the prudence, the good judgment and the prudence that you showed when you were attempting to do whatever it is that you were attempting to do. You tried to disclose everything to your CPA. You let them know what you were doing. And that's one of the first questions. What did your CPA know? So it's so important to sit down with your professionals and talk through the issues before you just assume that everything's going to be okay. That's it. Go ahead, Faith.
Jordan, do we have any questions at this point from the audience?
You kind of already answered one of them, is basically how far in advance should they start planning for residency?
Okay, well, let me just echo that a little bit. So going with the creeping domicile, as soon as you know or have an intent or a thought that you want to move to Florida, whether you've been coming and renting here for years, you might come and rent a home for a month every year, whether you've done that for years, really, as soon as you know you want to move to Florida or you think you want to move to Florida, that's the time to talk with your advisor. that's the time to start teeing it up. And that's the time to consider, all the steps that are required. And we'll get into this a little bit more. It's really that intent that Teague mentioned. So as soon as you know, it's not an overnight process. So hopefully that answers the question. But I think as we get into the presentation a little more, it might give you a little more insight, whoever asked that question. Okay, so I'm sure if anyone has made a thought or decided they may want to move to Florida, it's likely you've probably Googled or tried to find a checklist, or you've asked your CPA, or you sort of dug around and said, here's what I need to do to move to Florida, or here's what I need to do to exit my current state of residency. And I want to tell you that changing your state of residence is way more than checking off boxes. It's way more than saying, I got a driver's license or voter registration. There is a whole host of steps that are required to successfully establish residency in Florida. And I have this word here, not by accident: intent, 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 and habits. Intent and habits are the single biggest factor in a subjective intent, and we'll talk about the two-part test in a moment, that an auditor is going to look at in determining whether you've successfully changed your residency to Florida. And the numbers are staggering. New York alone, this just came out, there was an article the other day, how New York is targeting thousands of individuals, hundreds of thousands, in fact, who have claimed to have moved out of New York in 2020 during the pandemic. It's not $1 million+ income a year that triggers scrutiny. People earning 100,000 plus are getting notices. I moved to Florida 25 years ago when I was on the lower, I was more starting out in the accounting world. And my husband and I got a notice saying, please show us how you moved to Florida. And that was 25 years ago. So imagine, scroll forward now, 25 years, nearly 150,000 notices have gone out to taxpayers since January in an effort to basically put money back in the coffers of New York State. Residency. So I hear a lot of in conversations, hey, I just need to spend 183 days outside of New York, right? That's all I need to do. If I get a driver's license, I'm good, okay? No, there's a two-part test for residency. It's the subjective, home is where the heart is test. And I say that because that's the easiest way to drive that point home. It's all about your intent and your habits. And truly, when you meet, or when we meet with an auditor on our client's behalf, or when you conduct an audit, when you're audited, you have to prove to an auditor that you moved to Florida, that you changed your residency. The burden of proof is not on the state. The burden of proof is on you, the individual, who is checking that box to non-resident part-year resident as opposed to resident. And that initial year of checking the box is a critical turning point.
It's so important. What I always tell my clients is be able to withstand inspection. Don't leave yourself open. If you're going to take a position, make sure that whatever position you're taking can withstand inspection, because the auditors are smart. They do this for a living. Yep. And they know when somebody says, hey, I moved to Florida, but they go and research their social media or their gym membership or whatever, and it shows that they're working out every day in New Jersey. You're right. Going to have a problem, and you can make a small problem a big problem if you start making misrepresentations to the state.
Right.
So you don't want to cross that line. Go ahead, Faith.
Yeah, I mean, one of the keys that I wanted to convey here is it's not about a day count. It's not about just meeting your number of days. It really is, as Teague said, you really have to have the intent. And it's more than just a misstep. It's more than just joining a health club in Florida. It's more than just joining a religious affiliation or social clubs or golf, or golf clubs. It really, really is a very subjective intent. And when you're talking to your advisor, you have to almost convince your advisor it's a story that we have to tell. And that has to be conveyed to an auditor. You don't even get to tell the 183-day test. You don't even get to show them your day count, which, by the way, New York has, it's the two-part test. It's the subjective intent test and then the objective 183-day test, which you don't get to unless you prove step one. So for the 183-day test, super important that if you are planning a move, and this goes to one of our earlier questions, start keeping a calendar now. Start logging every day where you're at, where you've been. I know we all have iPhones and other types of social, other types of devices that track our time. You could get an app. There's a number of apps that you can subscribe to, which actually help track your days, but that's not even enough. You want to make sure you can document where you've been. Did you go out to dinner? Do you have receipts? Did you go to the bank? Did you just sit home on a Sunday and do absolutely nothing but watch something on TV? You still have to prove that day.
Sorry, Faith. I had a lady call me about, I don't know, 6 months ago from California, and she had purchased a condo in South Florida, I don't know, a few years ago, because she had a child attending one of the universities here. And she, talking with her, and she's explaining her situation. Oh, I've got a, $7 million home in Los Angeles and so on and so forth. But I really want to be a Florida resident and I have a condo there. And I said, okay, well, what are you going to do with the residence in LA? Well, I'm just going to keep it. I said, okay. So you're going to go live in the condo then in South Florida? And she says, yes. And I said, well, is your son still living there? She says, yes. I said, okay, how old is your son? He's like 25. And so you have this story that starts to get a little strange, right? You have a lady keeping a $7 million house on the West Coast that she's not using to move to Florida, and then is going to reside in a condo with her husband and her son that's 1,500 square feet on Brickell, and then you start to ask the other questions. Well, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about the story? Has to make sense. It has to be real. You can't sort of conjure up this notion of I'm a Florida resident just by filling out some driver's license, getting a new driver's license, and moving your address or changing your address with the IRS or what have you. You really have to walk like a duck, talk like a duck if you're going to be a duck, because the states are going to want their money. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing.
Okay. One more thing before we move on is when you get through, and let's hope you get through the subjective intent test with the state of New York or California or wherever, just remember, when you're keeping your day count, when you're tallying up where you spend your time on an annual basis, year over year, remember any part of a day spent in the state, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, or the entire day, it counts as a day in that state. So it's just kind of little secrets to, if you're flying into New York, fly into New Jersey. So you get in to Newark at 11:59 rather than New York at 11:59. And that's not a New York day, for example. So I want to talk about some of the factors that we look at and some of the important things that go into this subjective test. And are there any questions at this point before we go through that checklist?
If we do have a question,
Okay.
more along the lines of a specific example.
Okay.
So we'll try to answer it as best as we can. But basically, within the 183 days of living in Florida, if you go visit a place like New York for 3 or 4 days, does that count against the 183?
Yeah. So if you are, let's be clear, if you don't maintain a permanent place of abode in New York, so a place in the city, a house in the Hamptons, your residence where you might still have a place up in Rye, New York, where I have a client who kept their place in Rye and moved to Florida. If you are going to keep a place in New York, every single day you go up there, if you're going up for 3 days for a wedding, those 3 days count. everything counts. If you are, as they say, cutting all ties with your former resident state and moving to Florida, it's a very different conversation. And a lot of what we're discussing today is really geared more toward those individuals that want to keep a residence in New York. They're not ready to give up their apartment. They're not ready to give up their home, but yet they do want to make a move to Florida. They want Florida to be considered their resident state. But listen, we all have families that live in New York. You know, someone might have a family in New York. Someone might have kids that are still in college. They want to have the kids have access to go home. They want to spend holidays perhaps up there. So these conversations and the day count is really geared more toward if you're retaining any type of residence, or even if you sell your home and keep a small apartment in New York, that's what it's geared toward. I hope that helps answer the question.
This is where you really have to pay attention to your digital footprint as well. You know, when you're keeping that day count, there are so many ways to either prove or disprove where you are. Just, you know, pull out your credit card statement and, you know, your credit card, pull out an old credit card statement, and it almost becomes a geographic locator for you in, you know, at different points in time. So, you know, if you're buying things in one state or another state, it all shows up. So there's just so many ways for an auditor to back into where you really were during a certain period.
And I'm not going to go through this entire checklist. In fact, after the presentation, all those that are attending will send you a checklist. It's a little bit more, might be a little more comprehensive than this, but some of the bigger factors. Of course, you want to get your driver's license. Of course, you want to register to vote. If you can get an appointment in Florida to get a driver's license and register to vote, that is one thing. If you're planning to move to Florida, you need to give yourself significant lead time to get an appointment to get your driver's license. If you're buying a home, you want to apply for homestead in Florida. You want the home to be in your name. Otherwise, you will not be eligible for homestead. It has to be in your name individually. Other things, I'm just going through some of the ones that tend to be really important. Auditors look at social affiliations, religious affiliations, athletic affiliations. They go on all your social media and see where you say you live on your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram, Twitter, whatever all the social media is now. They're checking that. They will subpoena records for your SunPass, for your, I can't remember what it's called in New York, but whatever the equivalent of SunPass is in New York, they ask for that. Little things can make a huge difference. So when we talk about intent, it's not just checking off all the boxes on the list. It's really showing an auditor that you've truly changed a resident. I had a case about 5 years ago. A CEO of a company was moving to Florida, and we were having a really hard time proving to the auditor that he had changed his residency. He had maintained a residence in New York. The business was headquartered in New York, but they opened an office down here. And it turned on something very simple but overlooked: his bulldogs. Okay. And basically, he had his bulldogs, when he moved to Florida, he had his bulldogs flown down on a private jet. We had the documentation to show the dogs had flown down on the jet with their little names there. And we also gave their vet records to show basically they came down on day 1, and day 2, they went to the vet because he was very concerned that his beloved bulldogs might have been traumatized by the flight down. So that won the case for us. Kooky, crazy, won the case. So things that you think may be overlooked, maybe you have a precious bird, maybe you have a beautiful watch collection or an art collection. Those are the things you want to bring down here. That's the home is where the heart is. I would say, particularly during the pandemic, pets. I've read an article that pets are in short supply. It's hard to buy a pet these days. So showing that your pet is with you, that's like goes to the heart, and that's the home is where the heart is. And so when you look at all these factors, keep in mind, your intent has got to shine through. Any questions at this point?
I think we answered them all so far.
Okay. I think well, I'm going to go through these slides. I think Teague and I have touched on some of them already. When you're being audited, what are the factors that determine winning or losing an audit? And can your pet save the day? That's the pet story. I did have another audit probably about 10 years ago, and we actually had, he had his watch collection. I believe he flew down on a private jet, like a small jet with his watch collection, which is many. It's very subjective. Keep in mind when you're audited, it's a hugely subjective test. It's unfair because it is so subjective, and you take your auditor as you find him, but you have to convince the auditor that you've moved. There's a note here on habits versus intentions. So there was a recent case in New York, probably within the last year or two, and they showed intent. They got their driver's license, they checked all the boxes. But at the end of the day, they couldn't prove to the auditor that their habits had changed all that much. And that was a very critical case, because you think about your intentions and you check off all the boxes, but you got to look at your habits. Where are you spending your time? Are you doing everything the way you did it before? Or is Florida really where you want to be? And so I can't drive it home hard enough that home is truly where the heart is. And if you don't get by that subjective test, the 183 days doesn't matter. And as Teague pointed out, social media tells the story. May not have had the social media 30 years ago when I started out, and the factors might be different they look at now, and it might be more expansive, but it's still about the habits and intentions. Any questions?
Those auditors are combing through social media. They're using all sorts of different, lifestyle type audits to see where you are, what you're doing, and those sorts of things. So you don't want to leave the door open. You really want to cross your T's, dot your I's, and make yourself audit proof. And, for Florida, it's great that you follow the checklist and you do everything on there. You could even file a declaration of domicile and have it recorded. Mm-hmm. In addition to all the other steps, changing your voter registration, your license, your house of worship, your place of worship, all those things become important. But at the end of the day, if you leave the door open because you still have, doctors that you fly up and see in New York and other things like, where you really haven't cut your ties to your prior state, that little gray area there can be what, pulls you back in and seals your fate with the auditor. And the auditors have a lot of authority. They have a lot of discretionary authority, and I always think of the IRS. I'm like, when do you ever see the judge, the jury, and the executioner all wrapped up into one entity? It's kind of different than the rest of our legal system. So you really have to be smart when you make these moves and do it the right way. Find somebody like Faith, preferably Faith, but you want to do it right.
And when we talk about auditors, consider the residency checklist. Consider that as a start. Consider that as a starting point of what you look at to get yourself on the right track. Always remember the story. I mean, everything we've talked about here, social media and driver's license, even the declaration of domicile, a lot of the factors on a residency checklist, I don't want to call them self-serving, but you want to have contemporaneous actions with getting the driver's license. Oh, I not only got my driver's license and voter registration, I joined a religious affiliation. I'm joined a social club. I moved my memberships to Florida. I'm really here. My golfing, I joined 3 golf clubs while I'm here. Think about what you can do contemporaneous. And when we talk about stepping or the creeping domicile, you might get your driver's license tomorrow, but your home's not, you might be renting until your home is ready. You have to convince an auditor from tomorrow until your home is ready next year that that's the point in which you changed your domicile. And if you are contemplating a move to Florida, and if you are contemplating, if you own a business and there's an exit strategy, It's very critical to tee these issues up in the beginning, because a lot of times you want to be considered a resident of Florida before you might sell your business, because there could be benefits from a tax standpoint that you have to consider as well if you're a Florida resident as opposed to being taxed as a New York resident. So all things to think about. Any questions at this point? I wanted to discuss kind of more practicalities.
Nope, no more. I think we answered all the questions so far.
Okay. So practical advice when it comes to establishing residency in Florida. I think Teague has pointed out some, wonderful things to consider. Plan, plan, plan. Talk to your advisor well ahead of a move to identify what you need to do. Don't just discuss the items on a checklist. Discuss what really is meaningful. What is really meaningful in your life? Are you active in a condo association in New York? Are you buying, is your residence in Florida? Is there a condo association when you move here? Think about things that you can change your habits to down here. Think about your why. What is your why? Why is really important. If the why is simply you want to become a Florida resident, and tax planning, for sure. You don't want to pay boatloads of taxes to other states. That is absolutely okay if that's your why, but it's very important to document it. The social media, the digital footprint, some of the things that an auditor really, really focuses on. Your home, your family. Is your family with you? Is your wife and child living in another state while you're in Florida? Hugely important. There is, I believe I had a gentleman in Colorado who wanted to claim he was a resident of Florida. His children are in school in Colorado, and Colorado specifically has a rule that says children being in school in a grades in K through 12 in a school in Colorado is prima facie evidence that you're a resident of Colorado. So, things like that, it's important. I've had individuals come to me and say, well, I'll just separate from my spouse for the duration until I've successfully proved my change of residency. Those are areas you can consider, all those different suggestions. But at the end of the day, you have to think about what's going to make sense. And to an auditor, it has to be real. It has to really come from the heart, as well as I'm making a decision. I don't like living in Manhattan. I don't like having to stay locked up in my apartment. I want to move to Florida. I'm going to keep the apartment because maybe it's rent controlled or something along those lines. But you want to remember, you have to show your why to an auditor. And remember also, 150,000 audit notices have gone out since January. It's not just high net worth individuals getting audited. Nice typo there I made here. It's your habits as well as your intent. It's the folks like my husband and I who moved 25 years ago really did pick up and leave, as opposed to today. If I lived in New York, maybe I came to Florida to work, but I'm still working for a New York company. These are all things to consider. So I think practically speaking, you really have to talk to your trusted advisor. You really have to plan the move out. And unless you're intending to just sell your New York home and get rid of every single tie to New York, maybe your wife and family, you want to move to Florida and live in a beautiful climate, that's great. But anything you're going to keep in New York, if it's a home or an apartment, remember, you have to document it. And that goes for many states. I think we've been picking on New York, but that goes for any state in the Northeast or anywhere in the country for that matter.
It's so important. One of the things I find that as a tax attorney, what can be frustrating is when you have a client come in and, you start to realize that you're not getting the whole story. And what I always tell people is listen, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give me good information up front, I can't properly advise you about what you're trying to accomplish. So it's so important just to be candid and honest and discuss your objectives and what you're trying to accomplish when you sit down with that person and explain to them. Because once you disclose everything that you're doing to your CPA, it almost becomes a hedge. When people come to see me, I say, what did you tell your CPA? If you told your CPA X, Y, and Z, and you got erroneous advice or something wasn't right, for me, that becomes a way to help mitigate any penalties that my client might have for, doing something improper. But, the one thing I always say is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give your advisors the real story or the whole story, that's when you can get into trouble. So just be, very honest and sit down and, give them everything. Don't filter it. Let them know what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish.
Faith, is it my understanding, I read an article that this state of, especially New York, hired a couple dozen more auditors, so they're really getting aggressive on people moving.
They are really getting aggressive on people moving out of New York. They are auditing, and I think the letters that are going out are more in the way of like a desk audit. So a desk audit is where they just kind of send you a letter and ask you to send proof back or send documentation, but they really are going after people. And New York is not alone. I'm seeing a lot of audit activity, and not just in the residency area. We're seeing a lot of state audit activity in all areas of state and local taxation, because states are needing revenue. States want to raise money. And driving home, just so everyone knows, we talk about the same points and we reiterate the subjective intent in some of the tests, but it really is the process, and it really can't underscore it enough that it is a process. So some of the steps may seem mundane and routine, but it is a process you have to go through when you do want to change your residency.
So if you decide to do it, of course, we want you to buy a unit at 160 Marina Bay, you or your clients. This project is really personal to me. I was actually, when I was just finishing my tax program at the University of Miami, I took a job out in Los Angeles. And I was commuting and back and forth, and I was out in Los Angeles for 3 years and driving an hour a day to work, an hour a day back, and so on and so forth. And I woke up one day, I'm like, what am I doing? I want to get back to Fort Lauderdale. I want to open up my own firm. And I found this great little place on Isle of Venice, which is now our development site. That was 21 years ago. And I just sort of always knew. I bought a little condo there. And I got to tell you that living on the island is just an amazing place to live. It's all our site is all the way at the north side of the island, which means that when you get out of your car at the end of the day, it's just peaceful, tranquil, yet you're in the heart of Fort Lauderdale. If you go 2 minutes down Los Olas Boulevard, you're in downtown Fort Lauderdale going to your office. If you go 2 minutes the other direction, you're at the beach. It's just an amazing place to live. And having your boat in the backyard in Florida is it's the most sought after amenity in South Florida is a private marina. We have 14 boat slips. We have stressed all of, one of the things that we stress in our building is the technology. We've scrutinized every detail in this building. You will be completely connected anywhere throughout the property with high-speed internet. What I always like to say is you could be completely plugged in or completely unplugged. It's just such a unique experience living here. There are 3 words to sum up our project. It's location, luxury, and lifestyle. It's just a way of living that I really can't do it justice. You have to live on the island to experience it. Everything is so convenient. It's such a beautiful place to live. Fort Lauderdale is like a hidden treasure in South Florida. Everybody knows about Miami. Everybody knows about Palm Beach. But the really, one of the most beautiful cities I've ever lived in is Fort Lauderdale. And it's just all the waterways. It's how clean the city is. It's how convenient everything is to our property.
Very true.
So if you're inclined or you haven't already done so, please call Jordan. And if you're ready to make the move, please call Faith. I do a ton of work with Daskell Bolton, and I can tell you it is a top-notch firm. I deal with so many different people at Daskell within my tax practice. It's just a great group of people. They're super, super, super intelligent, very competent, so receptive to, any and all things. When it comes to helping their clients, they just go over and above. Truly a great firm. if you have clients that are looking to make the move, I can't encourage you enough. Contact the people at Daskell. If you're looking for, new representation, or if you're just looking for consultation, please call Faith. And if you want to buy a unit or you have a client that's interested, please have them reach out to Jordan. We can help you on so many different fronts. I really want to thank Faith for being here today on behalf of myself and my partners. And of course, thank Jordan for doing such a great job displaying our property and explaining how unique it is. And I would just like to thank everyone else for being here today.
Okay. Yeah, and Teague and Faith, thanks so much for your time. Thanks everybody for being here. Just like Teague mentioned, we will be sending out an email with information for everyone who's attended. Also, you can find this recording on we will be posting it to our YouTube page, 160 Marina Bay. So if you want to rewatch this again or send it to a friend, definitely check out our website or our video on our YouTube page. For more information on the project, definitely contact me, Jordan at 160marinabay.com. And for general information on the project, 160marinabay.com. And you can find all the information there as well. Again, everyone, Faith, Teague, thanks so much for your time. And to our audience, thank you very much for attending. We really appreciate it.
Take care, everybody.